While I left college with a tremendous story to tell, I went to college because I had already had a story to tell. And the story that I wanted to tell when I entered college actually does have an effect on how I tell the story about what happened while I was at college. Which just goes to say that the values that were espoused by the part of the college that seeded the unrest and caused the behavior that we've been examining for the last 2 years stands in direct opposition to the values that are the core principles of my art, which is diligence, hard work, merit, the pursuit of the beautiful, the adoration of the truth, and that entire path that I think comes from my heritage as, somebody from Europe and, the West or whatever, and all the art and literature that has informed the basis of my culture, I wanted to forward. And the values that are inherent in my culture were under constant attack at the college that I attended, which is funny because the college I attended would not exist without those values. But this all goes to say that I want to get back into the core project that I'm involved in. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book that I have for sale on Amazon, and you're free to listen along or to ignore me or to enjoy this or deconstruct this as you wish. So this just starts at the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean the whole work starts at the beginning and goes to the end of time or of literature, as far as I've been able to ascertain the beginning, the middle, and the end. So with that said, let's begin. The Firstborn. The world new met to man. There was a man, first boy from womb of Eve, birthed by the mother after paradise was stepped from, and the wilderness attained, by she and father Adam, and two more, two daughters of the garden who were born within the realm transcending space and time, as we first knew them then and know them now. So came those four from Eden to the world, cast not out of the garden, I maintain, and thus maintaining, call to question what? Our being here, and not our being there. Our smiling arc on earth from fall to grace, our messianic ardor, or else our ordeals of messiness, orders ordained. What might be undermined by stating this? That each us has been offered to know death, to learn how steeps the mountain that is love. Better than overturning one dogma with its inverse would be to open all our orthodoxies by proving this, that we are not made to believe belief. Belief is made by us to make our lives full of being, thus belying belief, a fleeing from being, and our lives lies if our belief lies not in being and making, but in what is already made believed. Yet, disregarding if you vest my tales with your belief, I say, there was a man, and he was born of woman just as we, and he was not alone within Eve's womb, and shy of proper time he came from her. Impatient was this boy to know the world. And in a queer event that be reversed much later in the Chronicles of Man, his ankle by his twin was being grasped, as if to keep them both within their mom, at least until the proper time had come for they to know the world. But he leapt forth, his womb mate spilling outward in his wake from their shared incubation. Adam took his firstborn sons from Eve while she was dressed and tended by their daughters as he bathed the newborns in the waters pouring from the center to the corners of the world. And then the namer named them, his two sons, Anwar, who brought the light to all he touched, and Anwas, the firstborn, who all the world was just as eager as this startling child to know and to be known by he who crawled already to the breast of Eve. He sucked 3 mouthfuls of her blessed pap, then was walking. The family laughed, his brightness brow, above his sharpness eyes. On it appeared a purpose, that the world, new met to man, rejoiced then to behold. For here was one, of such capacity as could contain the world entire in his crystal mind, and turn it to and fro, and then produce such combinations and affinities that no phenomenon, gen, nor watcher had yet grazed with their intent or willfulness. The world entire shuddered gleefully to be beholden to this boy's latent capacities. His sisters rushed to him to take him up in arms before he'd got too far from our first family, who then supped and slept, and on the morn continued forth into the bidden world, awaiting them. Opening the world. The world his plaything, firstborn son of man. Anwas, who always was the first to tread into any new-found dale or bower came to by his family, he at their front. E'en as a babe he sped ahead to see what in the world had come to be, valleys of varied clays, of varied heats and rains, variating plant, variating beast, their smells and calls and cries and how they grew and how they moved. He took all in without evaluation. All was for him. All seen, heard, tasted was just that. His childhood a long consumptive feast, without by Adam limit on him set. And when the Father gave him all the names, he held them on his tongue as though were fruits, and turned them in his mouth until he found a complementary art to what Vina, his elder sister, worked with herb and poem, to open up at mealtime vistas new came to by the palate. A similar art Anwas discovered hidden in the names the Father gave to what was given man to know and to consume, this tongue-born art. Anwas at first kept to himself. It was his pleasure to see and to know, not speak. And when he slept, his mother heard his cries and tended him, his body fraught with growth. Then he'd be up and off, a worried gaze she'd send with him, alike a guardian, which he evaded, climbing up some tree or plumbing through some cavern miles deep. His brother, Anwar, sometimes came along, but often he did not. His interests lay in life as it is given to be lived, and busy he would be with grain or flock when Anwas came to him and said, "I've found a hidden bend in stream where spirits play," or else, "There is a gulch not far away where lays a dying beast spawned by the gen." And sometimes Anwar followed, sometimes not. One day, when Anwas was out on his own, he found that he had need to speak aloud. It does not matter why, perhaps some ruse of water-bending light, echoing cave, a thing that sparked his doubt in what he sensed. He learned his words were not unlike his hands, quite apt at tangling and untangling things. And so he spoke aloud and heard his voice reflected off a wall or rushing stream, and wondered he aloud, "Is he who speaks the same as he who hears?" And this was so. And after that he thought no more to ask his brother if he'd like to join these treks, which as he grew increased in length and breadth, and frequently returning to his clan, what grew as Eve gave birth to Adam's seed, who all partook in opening the world. What matters mind? And so he roamed his way into a man, solitary mostly, but not alone, for he was with the world and it with him. In constant congress were they two engaged, and yet all other men would have by time of manhood's breach applied somehow their skill into a discipline or plastic art. But he his hands used only to survey reactions and consistencies, as though to know is its own valid form of work, which in our present times disputed not. In your periphery, if not your hand, Are there not plenty testaments to this, that knowing is as real as any act? But then, with world so new, without much tools or structures, maybe here and there a cairn, what was knowing's extent? Could it, the fruit, convince to ripen late? Could it, the day, extend into the night? Yes, it well could. If from the stalk of hemp he worked a wick, and from the nut and seed he oil pressed, and from the pliant clay he plied a pot, then daylight into night he would have brought. For knowledge, then as now, is power, yet to use it must be put to prove its worth. And he did not but hoard what he had found, so that Anwas on manhood's breach was perched, in perfect observation, motionless, vigilant as a falcon on a tree. A younger sibling came to him, named Seth, a gentle soul upon whose brow a cleft of worry was engraved. Anwas then sat upon a sandstone rise by Pishon stream, examining the salmon in their run. As Seth approached the firstborn, he called out, "Our parents have declared a gathering to celebrate our venture to this realm, and all our families called to convene where our family stepped from Eden to the world." "That place, it differs not from any place," Anwas replied, "as unique as all else." "But it is sacred to our kind," said Seth. "All in its kind is sacred to our kind," the Sayyid said. "Each aspect of this world, each part of it, each particle awaits our tending unto it with our attent. 'Tis our attent what's sacred, not the things what give us grounding in this world we tend. But come, speak what you've come to me to speak." Then Seth to Anwas bared what troubled him. "My mind cannot break free of certain thoughts. These thoughts are of," Anwas silenced Seth. "The thoughts are not the matter, but the mind." "And how is it that I might change my mind?" "By first confusing not your thoughts for you, but knowing them as byproducts thereof. They are but by your way, and not themselves obstructions to be solved by thinking more." "And how should I?" asked Seth, whom Anwas hushed, by pointing at the salmon in their run. "The only fish that make it to their source are those who become nothing but their goal. In turn, your mind is channeling your soul toward a thing outside it. But what's that thing? And who chose it? Who placed it out of reach? How can it not already be with you? The truth is, what you'd have is having you. You are possessed by what you would possess. For nothing that's outside can rouse what's in if there is not already sympathy between what does the wishing and what's wished. This trouble that you feel is not held in what you'd behold or'd have to hold, but it is but a signal of change within. And it will cease once what you wish was yours is no more by your wish made what's not yours. And once that change occurs, what you're without will quick enough conform to what's within, or else it will dissolve and be no mind. But what I want's a woman, of her the truth is this, regardless, what you seek, if it is not already one with you, then leave it go, or one with it become, but above all else do not be played the fool. If trouble's what you want, do not pretend its cause is anywhere but in yourself. The measure that is man. The first thing that he did was draw a line. His first action of consequence was this. It was perhaps 1 yard in length, as straight as it was shallow, and it changed nothing. Nothing, that is, until intent he made to use that line to separate a word from all the other words. This word was I. He ate, he slept, he walked, he thought, removed from that word I, watching his cleverness game ways of using it, and this he squelched by sliver set beneath his fingernail. inserted so that on this side of the line, an irritation took the place of self, at least the self that dwelt inside of speech. Such an action is hardly anything inconsequent. Through it, he sought to prove what was reflex in him and what was will, what in him was instinct and what intent. And after some few moons, he'd lost the need to, in his words and thoughts, rely on me. Then one day to his brother Anwas went, Said Anwar, who'd shared Eve's womb with him, living with his family in northern Kush. Near to their camp, their laughter met his ears, and he stopped short, and inwardly he mused, where in the world is such fecundity? The world was bountiful before we came, but was it beautiful? It had sweetness, but was it succulent? It was wet, cold, arid, scorching. It was full of motion and event. It was bursting with birth, death, all types of pleasure, all types of pain. Yet where was its trilling heart and its lament? Where was its raptured measurement, delight? The joyous dance of Anwar's eldest girl possesses more grace in a single step than every gazelle roaming Asher's plains. And that song that is sung by his youngest son, 1,000 birds could not match his elan. Who else but us gives to the world the world? All is just is until we take it up, and form of it form, taste into it taste. Anwas was weeping now, his thoughts grown stark, within the shadows crowding round their camp. He'd come to speak of bodies in the sky, their influence on weathers of the earth. But now he could not speak, but only I. And what was now this I to he? What else but an obstruction between him and all his kin and kind? What else was I? But what maintained his distance from an us, a distance by which he could orient himself within a freedom to himself and world, and all what in the world could be arranged and rearranged. He dried his eyes and traveled to the line that he had drawn, but he could not find it, could only say, I, till he came upon a plain in Asher, where he stood and shut his lips, and saw the earth and sky, and how they might be linked to one another and made one, beyond the unity of accident. By way of what he as a man could build, an object without use, an object tall, upright like man, who is the measurer, the pivot by which world attains axes of proportion and dimension unlike the ones flown by the birds and trumped by beasts, dependent on the seasons, on the sun, but this, his work, would add an up and down, and north and south, and east and west, and more. The stars, too, by his work, would be endowed with that which is alone for man to give, those qualities of qualities, what lay consummate on the face that faces world, judgment, calculation, and willfulness. And thus decided, Anwas moved to build. That's enough for today's reading. Join me again in the future where I divulge more of this epic poem, written in the shadow of a terrible situation. But what do those two things have in common? Either everything or nothing. That's for all of us to ignore or delve into at another time. Good night.